I'm Glenn McGuinness, and this is Outburst. On the program, was invoking the Emergencies Act a necessary measure?
I think it was unfortunately necessary, yes.
No, I don't think so.
Yes and no.
The laws that we had in place should have been able to cover it.
But first, we might be seeing a light at the end of the tunnel when it comes to COVID. We're also seeing provinces across the country getting rid of restrictions and making a push to bringing life back to normal after 2 years of a global pandemic. This has led to calls by the opposition for the Prime Minister to follow suit not only with the provinces, but with other nations around the world who have dropped restrictions and are moving on as well. So, what's your take? Our question.
Should all pandemic restrictions be lifted?
I wouldn't say all, I'd say some. You know, I know the kids are getting a little stressed out about wearing masks, and I think those maybe should be the first ones to go, just to kind of get back to normal. And, you know, we can't continue like this forever. It doesn't make sense. We have to just kind of let go at some point. I mean, slowly we can, but I wouldn't say rush into it, but, you know, slow, small baby steps to just get back to normal would be a good start. We need to.
Yeah, you know, I think so. I just got over COVID last week, and it wasn't really that big of an issue to me, but to each his own.
No, I think Canada did extremely well at the beginning and even now. I think, we can leave some of those restrictions still on, but of course, it should be like, as less restrictions as possible.
That is a tough one. I don't think so, not yet. Definitely not masks, and I am pro passport, so I think I like those ones. And I'd be scared if it was all lifted right now.
You just kind of follow whatever the top health regulations are saying and go by their advice because they're the experts in the field.
I'm both ways with the vaccination passport. It's just nice knowing that I've gone into a restaurant that I feel 100% that everyone in there has been vaccinated. It's just a security blanket for me. But it's unfair for the others to not live life as well. So I think they're just trying to manage it as best they can. So I would say keep it as is for now.
I think the idea of removing masking restrictions is just going to be catastrophic. I mean, for getting rid of all the other protections, the least we can do is keep in masking, especially, I understand for some smaller workplaces, but for indoor public areas, if we want to have any hope of curbing transmission and keeping it down and not having another surge on our hospitals, we have to keep masking in place.
Well, the pandemic isn't totally over. When it's totally over, then all the restrictions should be erased, and that's the end of the pandemic. But the pandemic is still going on. People are still in hospitals, still in ICU. Terribly, people are still dying. So I think some of the restrictions should remain.
All pandemic restrictions should be lifted, simply for the fact that I feel like we've done enough, like we followed the lockdown, we followed mask protocols, we followed vaccination protocols. I feel like most of the population is vaccinated. It's about time that we get back to life as usual.
Until we can declare this as an endemic, I think it would be wise to keep masks. If you're vaccinated 2 or 3 doses, you should be safe in other circumstances.
I can't wait for them to be lifted, to be honest. I think we've passed the peak, and I think people are really looking forward to getting back to normal.
Lockdowns in themselves, from a scientific perspective, are not well proven, actually. They actually cause more damage from a mental health perspective. So I'm not sure how you balance the risk-benefit in those two cases.
I think that they should. I think it should be a careful easing, controlled and observed on the way. But I do think that they should be lifted. The data supports it. I think it's time in general to work our way in that direction, get back to normal.
How do I know who is vulnerable, who is not? So right now, no, because there are still too many ifs, ands, or buts that have to be answered that have not been answered.
Well, most of the newer strains of the COVID are not as dangerous as the earlier ones. So I don't feel that it's necessary to continue them.
You know what? I like to leave those decisions to people that have a lot of information about COVID. I mean, I as an individual don't feel that I could make that happen. You know, I feel like everything that has happened in the last 2.5 years has happened for a reason. I know it's not been the greatest or funnest, and it's affected a lot of people with their mental health. But I think it's getting to a point where the mandates and restrictions can be lifted, and that's why I feel like we're going into phase 1 right now. And I feel as a person that I'm super excited about what's going to be happening in this phase.
Yes, that it's time to have all of them lifted. We have done due diligence, and perhaps it is time to open things up and just follow like some of your own protocols, 6 feet apart, and wear a mask if you want. But yes, lift the restrictions. It's time.
The beginning of the end of the trucker protests staged here in Ottawa and in different parts of the country was when the Prime Minister invoked the Emergencies Act, giving the government and police more powers to restore order. These measures were staunchly opposed in the House of Commons by the Conservatives and the Bloc Québécois. The NDP did lend their support, but with some trepidation. We took to the streets to ask Canadians if they feel these measures were appropriate. Our question:
was invoking the Emergencies Act a necessary measure?
It's a tough question. I think when the Prime Minister elicited to put it in place, probably the right time, a little bit late maybe. And I know it allows them to cut some red tape and allow the police to kind of gather together and get rid of the convoy. So yeah, I'm not against it. I think it was a good idea.
I do understand them implementing it. I think we're going to have more of a public inquiry to find out whether or not it was actually justified at the time based on the intelligence that they had.
I think it was unfortunately necessary, yes. I don't see any other way that they could have gotten rid of the convoy people. The police didn't have the jurisdiction they needed. They didn't have the manpower they needed. The government didn't have the rules and regulations set up.
We obviously weren't getting where we had to be with respect to getting rid of that protest, which was going on for some three weeks. That's no longer a protest. That was an insurgency. And the measures that were in place weren't working. We needed more. And when it's an intergovernmental approach where who is in charge of what, you have to have the guy on top telling us what the story is and how it's going to play out.
Like, I do think that we should have the right to protest, and obviously making the protest illegal is, like, unfortunate. But at the same time, like, it's important that the people who actually live here have an opportunity to go about their lives as usual, because I'm sure not everyone in Ottawa supported the truckers being here. And so for those people to not want to be a part of it and still have their livelihoods greatly affected by it, I think that's unfortunate.
I think it expedited the removal of the blockade. Whether or not we needed an emergency act to do what they eventually did remains to be seen. There's an inquiry or something to decide on that. I think it certainly prompted reactions from the people organizing the blockade, and eventually 4 of them were arrested, and some of them are still paying for it. I don't think I'll buy a truck.
No, because the current options they had available to them were not capable of dealing with the situation at hand, and therefore something had to be done. Is it a great look that they had to do it? No. I would have preferred if it could have been handled in a better way, but that option didn't look like it was present.
The reason that Justin Trudeau did that was because it gave him more power over the people that are fighting for their rights.
No, I don't think so. I haven't been following much, but they didn't look violent to me. It didn't really seem like it seemed a little drastic, right? And they're freezing people's bank accounts, and it's pretty crazy.
People are petrified now, and so what's next? You know, are the army going to come down the street next? You know, but I wish that we can just resolve things without going to such measures. People should be respectful of, if we didn't have laws, then it would be absolutely crazy out there. But it's absolutely crazy out there with laws in place. So we've got to have something, right? Boundaries.
Yeah, the radical protest I consider it radical in Ottawa right now. I do agree with, getting the RCMP in and like figuring that out. But it's just tough if it's all protests, because if the ones that we agree with, then you don't want that. So
it was a good step because tons of people were outside protesting and stuff. I feel that everybody should be heard, but at the same time, there should be some limit. We should do things within a limit. Yeah.
It has to be dealt with somehow, and I firmly believe in our government and their decisions, and I think what happened was a necessary evil. We had to deal with it the way we thought best.
I don't believe it was. I believe that the laws that we had in place should have been able to cover it.
Honestly, I feel that it was, because we needed to basically look at the whole entire situation and take all bunch of information into account. And I feel like you always need to take a pause to get that information so that you can make informed decisions. So I do feel like there was a period of time that was needed to do this, so that we could get prepared, so we could know how to deal with this, so we could make sure we're being safe as possible. So yeah, I do feel that it was a good thing that happened. And now that we're moving into phase 1, obviously everything we've done has led us to this point. So yeah, I think it was a good thing.
I don't feel that invoking the Emergencies Act was, because everything that took care of the protests was done through existing laws and existing legislation.
Those people did not have the right. It's a free country, yes, I know. But they did not have the right to basically put all these other people, not in jail, but basically behind the closed curtain. That is not what our life in Canada is supposed to be like.
The name Iqaluit is an Inuktitut word meaning place of many fish, northern tundra, or jewel in the Arctic. The answer, place of many fish. Iqaluit in the Inuktitut language means place of many fish. Iqaluit is also one of the fastest growing communities in the country. From 1955 to 1987, the settlement was known as Frobisher Bay until it reverted to Iqaluit, its original Inuktitut name. In 1999, the new territory of Nunavut was created, and Iqaluit was named as its capital, making it Canada's newest and most northerly capital city.
Some might be quick to tell you that the trucker protests held here in Ottawa was definitely not one of Canada's finest moments. For a capital city to endure an occupation and constant noise for over 3 weeks has some wondering how the rest of the world looks at us because of it. We sent our cameras out to ask Canadians how they feel the rest of the world saw this. Our question:
how have the protests affected how other nations view Canada?
I think it impacted big time, because Canada has always been one of the known as the nicest country in the world. But seeing all these protests and seeing a lot of RCMP officers and defense people with sticks on their hand and guns loaded, it looks a little bit strange, and I think it did impacted the way people view us. Yeah, big time.
I consider it pretty embarrassing, because I thought we were better than this, and we've seen the states do all their crazy stuff, so I thought it's just not how you properly do politics. I don't like it. So yeah, it's pretty embarrassing. Gotta be honest.
It is starting to look a little bit bad on us that we are so conflicted ourselves, but that's kind of the day and age we're in, where there's so much availability for discussions that it's really hard to have a middle ground stance.
Well, from what I've seen on the internet, as far as the other is what we're doing in Canada with the trucks and etc. Everyone around the world is starting to do the same thing, And I think that people don't really know what else to do other than protest and honk their horns.
I think it's put Canada at shame. I don't go around and voice my opinion because I've been yelled at one too many times. I have the right to choose what I want to do, and so do the anti-vaxxers. But you have no right to come back to me and shout at me and tell me that I've done something wrong.
I don't think there's anything wrong with protests. Where would we be today if we hadn't had protests? Where would the women's vote be if we hadn't had protests? So I think protesting is great. Just keep it peaceful and safe for everybody.
Wow, that's a difficult one to answer because we are restricted. The only thing that we have to go by is what we see on TV and on the news. So that's difficult to see how they see us now. Do they see us as crybabies? Do they see us as basically wanting freedom to do whatever we want, whenever we want it? I don't think that's fair, but I would not want to be in another country right now and say that I'm from Canada.
I think it's a mixed bag. There's been so much going on between the protesters, the governments, all the different sources of media, and even the misinformation from people online, that I think it's probably confused them about where we stand politically and as a nation.
So I do think it affects the way they see us, and obviously for countries where like protesting and having that kind of like show of unity for people who don't support vaccination, don't support the mandates, I think it was encouraging for them to see that because maybe they're not able to kind of have that show of unity in their own countries.
I have friends in England that said, "What is going on in Canada?" I said, "Well, we woke up." It has. I mean, some people really thought that the type of democracy we had, the way, we're looked at by the world, they thought we were great. And then they said, well, you're not that exempt from, I think the influence of past activities in the United States may have prompted the way this was handled in many ways. The Capitol, the attack on the Capitol and all that, so, yeah.
I think so. I have some family in the States, and they were certainly, interested in it. Put Ottawa on the map. We were in the papers everywhere in the States and around the world. So interesting, probably not in the best light. As Canadians, it's interesting because Canadians are seen as pretty docile people, especially here in Ottawa. We're all, most of us are public servants. So it was quite surprising, I think, to the rest of the world. But certainly a sign of, not that I support the convoy in any way, but I think it helped light a fire under, certain politicians.
I think it has, especially because some of the protests have spread. Protests like the ones in Ottawa have spread to other countries. New Zealand, for example, is a good reason. I'm sure everyone in Wellington knows that the people protesting there are taking their cues from the protests in Ottawa. So Canada's name is out there, not in a good way, unfortunately.
Oh, I really don't know. I think some will say great, some will say no. The fact that we did it without any bloodshed shows we aren't our neighbors to the south, is what it boils down to. So I'm happy the way it played out with no one really getting no blood on the road.
Inflation at its highest point in decades, interest rates rising, gas prices shockingly high, and the price of everything going up. Canadians are paying more to keep going no matter which way they turn. However, the Bank of Canada says it sees some solid momentum in the Canadian economy in the weeks and months to come. But with the lingering economic effects from the pandemic and what's going on with Russia and Ukraine, it doesn't look like things will be getting better anytime soon. So, how are you faring through this? Our question.
How are you coping with the higher cost of living?
I ain't, because I only get a little bit of money, and that don't even do me a month. It's very low, and the cost of food and stuff is expensive. I'm supposed to be on a certain kind of diet. I can't afford that diet.
I'm taking out credit. I'm going in debt. That's how I'm coping.
You cut where you can. You buy a little less hamburger. And you pay what you have to pay. I guess sucking it up is the Canadian way. It's hard to see, but we knew it was coming, so yes.
We aren't getting ahead as Canadians, especially with the amount of debt that Canadians have. It's enormous, and we can't afford to keep up with the cost of living. We just simply can't. Same with housing. People can't afford housing like they used to be able to.
I don't go anywhere. My bills are just about the same, except that when I put oil in my tank, that was a shocker. I have only had one gas fill in my car because I don't go anywhere, so I don't use my car. So far it hasn't affected me, but I know that there are others that are on a very strict budget and they're not making it.
It hasn't affected me that much, and I'm just living on a pension, by the way, but you just have to keep going down from steak down to bologna and hot dogs. But I can't say that it really did much of a difference. It's just that you keep having to readjust. Like I bought some apples the other day. I've never paid $4 for 3 apples.
I'm a student right now, so I'm doing my part-time job. So I'm fine with it as of now. I mean, I'm new to Canada. It's just been 4 months, so right now I'm able to live my expenses out. But once I get my full job and when I analyze how the cost is, then I can say. Right now I'm not able to answer that, sorry.
I try to, not starve myself, but I treat myself a little bit less. I try to conserve in terms of food that we're using. Working from home helps in terms of gas consumption, at least. I thankfully have the privilege of doing that, as does my partner. I really feel for people who don't have that ability to avoid the virus, and it's the less money you make, the harder it is to curtail your expenses, because you don't have access to, enough money to buy things in bulk to get them at a cheaper price. Like, I mean, you can buy some stuff in bulk, but not at the same amounts, right? So.
Oh, absolutely, everyone has. Everyone's paying more for gas, filled up the car just yesterday, and it costs more than it ever has in my lifetime, as I remember. Groceries are a lot more expensive. So I think that you just have to be more careful with how you spend your money right now. If the prices go even higher from here, then even more drastic steps might be necessary in households. But right now it's doable, but just barely.
I'm leaving. I'm going to Mexico. It's a lot cheaper. Well, coping. I mean, you make more choices that are judicious. I mean, you look at the prices and say, okay, do I need this? Can I wait? And I think we're going to see that for the next little while, the inflation rate being at as high as it is. And I don't think salaries or pensions or any of those things are keeping up. So people will have to make choices.
Well, we bought an electric car, knowing that gas prices were going to go up, so that's one thing. And we're certainly seeing on the grocery bill, it is what it is. We're just not going out as much anymore, so we're staying home and cooking ourselves. So yeah, that's how we're doing it.
You have to deal with it, is what it boils down to. It's no fun. I'm personally not in that big a problem as a result of it, but I know a lot of people are. So what can I say? Things are going to have to get more expensive, like it or not. We have a real environmental issue on our hands, and that won't be done just by good wishes.
It's hard to feel if it's the effect of the pandemic or what, since it's been 2 years of dealing with this, but you can also we live in one of the nicest spots in the nicest countries, and immigration is high right now. So obviously the cost of living is going to go up because everyone wants to live here. And that's kind of the byproduct of where we are right now. And I guess COVID has caused inflation to go up, which isn't helping things because people want to buy real estate. But I'm not at a point where I'm not concerned about it. You don't have too many options. Where else are we going to go? So you just close your eyes and swipe your visa, you know?
It's definitely difficult, that's for sure, especially food prices, rental, mortgages, all that. I mean, it definitely needs to come down. We can't keep living like this, especially with salaries that don't match quality of life, quality of living. It's not fair, especially for new people trying to move to here, to BC especially. Very expensive. That definitely needs to come down.
It's challenging. I have 2 kids, and you gotta try something on the side or find some New York or do whatever you have to do to get your money, right? Like, you still got to feed the kids.
Well, higher cost has become extremely challenging, and it is getting even more challenging because my partner is ill. So I'm only one person earning. So it is getting difficult over the time. They're saying that it's a supply chain issue. Some people are saying that it's another kind of .com bubbles and stuff. But again, in my opinion, it should come down. It impacted a lot of people, especially the middle classes. Yeah.
I wish costs were a little better for everybody. I can only think that it's probably going to get worse with the trucks clogging up the borders and the world starting to have problems with deliveries of shipments of goods. So I suspect inflation is probably going to go up even higher than it is right now, which is unfortunate.
Well, I'm on short-term disability again. I've broken my wrist, so I am very, very stressed because not only am I making less, I go to the grocery stores now, and it's absolutely incredible how much everything has gone up. I'm not making any more money, and yet everything has gone exponentially. So it's really scary for not only myself, for people that don't make enough for their whole family. It's scary out there.
I'm pretty lucky as I get support from my family, so I rent from them, so it's controlled. It's not too bad, but I definitely noticed the impacts in the neighborhood. I live just down on Bernard, and the amount of street people, unhoused people, is going up significantly. And Kelowna has a really bad divide, I think. There's so many street people. But yeah, it's tough out there, I think. And when I was trying to find a place before I rented from my parents, it was tough. There's nothing out there under $1,200 a month. And if you're single, it's impossible. You need to be in a relationship pretty much to afford to live.
Thanks for watching this episode of Outburst on CPAC. If you have any comments about this show or any other show, you can find us on social media. You can also find us on our website at www.cpac.ca. I'm Glenn McGuinness, and on behalf of my colleagues at the Cable Public Affairs Channel, thanks for watching. We'll see you next time.